Joining me now here at the desk is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. It's great to see you, Debbie, and it's always fascinating to be up here at the Mackinac Policy Conference with you because I watch you walk through the parlor where we're sitting right now, and you get stopped all the time. And the connections that we're able to make now up here on the island coming out of what we've been experiencing and still experiencing a lot of things. What are people talking to you about?
Well, first of all, what's great is they're people I haven't seen in 2 years.
Yeah.
They're new people that have, just as I was racing to hear the new president of Lawrence Tech wanted to stop and introduce himself. So it's just meeting new players is part of it. Then people want to talk about a whole range of issues. They're worried about education. The hospitals are very worried about the shortage of labor, the nurses, what they're going to do, how worn out they are, and they're worried about new surges. Schools who are worried about public safety and the mental health issues related to their kids. I mean, I could just go through, the manufacturers are worried about the supply chain and jobs. And people are talking about how people are being impacted by gas prices and food costs.
Yeah, the inflation has been tremendous. I'd like to start with school safety and guns, because I believe that is what everyone is looking to Washington now to do, coming out of what happened in Texas at Robb Elementary School. And there is this feeling that nothing can be done. Talk to me about maybe some of the conversations that you have had. Do you believe that the time is now that we are going to see something coming out of the Senate that will make sense, whether that is universal background checks, where that is a red flag law, or that is raising the age for gun ownership?
So I believe that the perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. I don't know how many times we can have these conversations, and I've been part of them for years. I actually was there and watched when the 94 gun bill happened, because John was the critical vote and critical component of it. What I want is us to not go to our normal corners and everybody goes to the corner and nothing happens. I think, we had another shooting last night
in Tulsa.
It's in Oklahoma, as you said. So what I'm hopeful is I don't even want to have expectations, or what I want is people to come together and to know that all these mass shootings that we've seen in schools have been done by someone that's under 21. They're 18. So should an 18-year-old really have access to an automatic weapon? How do we address mental health issues, which goes beyond guns in our schools? We have very serious, people are struggling. How do we address to invest in that? Are universal background checks that dangerous? We're not saying you can't own a gun. Let's just maybe try to keep the guns out of the hands of those that shouldn't have it. But if we scream at people, we force people back into a corner, it's not going to happen. So I'm trying to have just real conversations with people about how do we make progress. And not, by the way, I think that it isn't just policymakers that should be having these discussions. I think that all of us in our community need to really take responsibility for having those conversations about hate in our community. How much of some of this is that somebody's been bullied at some time? How do we stand up to bullying? How do we talk about the fear and the division in our communities right now? It's on all of us right now to look at what's happening to our country, the division, and to stand up to hate when we see it.
And I think it's also on all of us to be able to have a conversation and to be able to change our mind. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about. I mean, you were in the job of governing and in the politic of consensus and decision making at the highest level. And the sometimes weakness that it feels if we change our minds or if we change our stance and we say, oh, you know what, I'm going to listen to that different opinion. Where's that capacity for us to have more of those conversations or stop and say, maybe I'm not right? And what's the danger of admitting that?
So one of the phrases my husband was famous for was, compromise is not a dirty word. And it's always been one of my rules. None of us, we are all stronger when we listen to each other. Each of us has had different life experiences. We bring different perspectives to the table. None of us knows it all. We don't have all the magic answers. So I try to go into discussions with people with an open mind I may have strong feelings. We'll fight and articulate that. If it's about the auto industry, I know what I'm talking about. And I'm very strong in the meetings with people. But one of the you want to know, this is not guns, but I'm going to tell you one of the things that I'm the proudest of in my career.
Okay.
And it happened in the last year. I did not sign on to the Green New Deal because labor wasn't at the table when that was negotiated. And I told the environmentalist community I'd make a deal with them, and they would make a deal with me, and I would bring everybody to the table. So I'd bring all the environmental groups and the labor groups together, and we would talk. And we did. And the presidents of every national major environmental organization, 18 of them, were at the table. And president of UAW, Steelworkers, IBEW, were all at the table. And it was those talks, and the OEMs knew what we were doing and came in later, led to being at the White House last August, where it was announced a goal of, by 2030, of 50% sales of zero-emission vehicles. That was a whole lot of people who had very wanted to come, but listened, understood the fears, the technology, the vision, the goals, and came to an agreement.
And in the hot take world that we live in, we want to see, we hate this, we want this, and we want it done tomorrow. Talk to me a little bit, Debbie, about some of the money, and I want to talk about the auto industry and where we're seeing total transformation. And a little bit of hand-wringing here in Michigan about how can we be on the forefront, how can we make sure that we get the investment, and how can we make sure that the money that is going to be earmarked for what the future is going to be like ends up here.
We have to work for it. We have to earn it. I talk to all of these companies on a very regular basis that are looking to locate battery plants or one of the particular, but electric vehicles and all of the charging stations and all of that. When I talked to people a year and a half ago, and believe me, I was screaming at everybody in state, they said to me, Michigan doesn't care. If we go to another state, they roll out a red carpet. We don't know if someone's a Republican or a Democrat. We don't even know what role they have if they're partnerships, and they make you feel welcome. They make you feel like they want you to come. We weren't doing that a year and a half ago. I mean, it was almost a word-for-word script I heard from 10 companies in a row. And it's broader. We also need to make sure that we're competitive. We've got to get the land and get the land preparation and have the infrastructure there. Utility rates have been high, but utilities have come to the table and are working on it. Probably not enough. We just lost one in Wayne County that I wasn't. But more because people weren't at the table. We're still in the run for a chips plant because CMS is, trying to make sure that they're competitive. It's partnerships. But we have to be united on saying we want that business here. And Republicans and Democrats in the state legislature. And it's not only when you talk to these companies, it's not only just, I'm going to be blunt because I am. Stellantis went to Indiana. We actually offered them more money in Michigan than Indiana did. But it's how they view the state.
Yeah, sometimes it's not about the money.
It's how they view the climate, the attitudes. Do they want us? Are they going to work together?
And that's the intangibles sometimes.
That's
that
correct.
You can't just say, well, check a box, we're all on the same team. But it has to play out, and it has to be that feeling.
So we got to work together.
Yeah.
Me in Michigan, this is home. Been my home my whole life, and I love it. And we put the world on wheels, and I want to make sure we stay at the forefront of innovation and technology and are the state that continues to lead the world in mobility. But that means we all have to be on the same team, rowing in the same direction and making people feel welcome and wanted.
I want to shift gears a little bit. And Debbie, I want to ask you about, we've talked an awful lot about how women have left the workforce during the pandemic and the need for caregiving help for them, for childcare, and for flexibility of work and making sure that women who left can get back in. And you know as well as I that sometimes they cannot get back in at the same level. They have to start lower again. What is the importance of making sure the opportunities for women to get back into the workforce? What can we do?
Well, there are a lot of different issues. It's something I've been very focused on. I was just talking to the Kellogg Foundation about it, actually. Caregiving is probably one of the number one barriers for women. Like it or not, men say they're going to share the responsibility, but women are the child caregivers.
It bears out in statistics. We're
It's
not,
there.
you know.
And the senior caregivers.
Yes.
I mean, the elder care and caregiving. We don't have enough caregiving workers. It's too expensive. People can't afford it. And we have to make it affordable. We have to encourage more to go in it. And we got to pay caregivers what they're worth. Yeah. Caregiving makes all other work possible. If you're not worried about your loved one, then you can go to work. So we need to invest in caregiving for both child care and the elder care, which is one of my passions. I've got the bill that's been moving through they're both my passions, but elder care, it's my bill that's moving through the Congress right now. And quite frankly, there are many caregivers that are working 2 jobs and are still living below the poverty line. They don't get benefits. And yet we're entrusting the most important things in our life to these caregivers. So I think we need to invest in caregiving, pay caregivers what they're worth, help open up more child care centers. I think employers who are desperate for employees are looking at caregiving as being another potential benefit. Yeah. Do they open caregiving sites at their work site? How do they incentivize? So that's one. But then we also, I worry. I'm not old, but I'm seasoned. When I, interviewed for my first job at General Motors, was asked why would a woman want to work at GM? And
what did you say?
Because GM would benefit for having more women in their workforce.
Absolutely.
And it was true, by the way. But, back in those days, too, you know this as I do. I'm a little more seasoned than you. Was that women felt threatened by one person's success instead of all of us uplifting the other. But we're starting to see women take a step back, and that worries me. We got to support each other. We got to make sure. I mean, it's great. Mary Barr and I worked together for a long time at GM together. We're colleagues. And she's now CEO of GM, and she's trying to. But we need to make sure that women are not being penalized as they come back into the workforce after. And we have to be intentional. You used that word a minute ago when I am very intentional about the work that I do, because none of this is going to happen on any issue unless we are intentionally focused on it.
I'm always curious about people's to-do list, and I'm sure that you have a list of things and that you would like to get done, and I'm sure sometimes the order of those things changed. And I'm curious, as you leave Mackinac and all the different conversations that you've had with people, have priorities shifted in your mind, or is there something new that you're like, I didn't even think about that or consider that, but now this is something that I'm going to work towards?
I would answer that differently, because my passions have been there, and they're there. Civility, what we're talking about here is, as you know, something that I've worked on for decades. I wrote my thesis on it for my master's 30-some years ago. But I do think there are more people that want to engage in that. I'm finding caregiving is one of my passions. Build Back Better had caregiving in it. I'm still hopeful we can get it through in some way. But I'm finding partners here that want to work with me on caregiving. Even the infrastructure bill, and we're all talking about the roads and the bridges here, but the infrastructure bill has internet broadband in it and getting the lead out of every pipe in this state and around the country, but for us and the schools.
And that's a massive story.
Partners here that, hey, you want to work with you on it. Yeah. Guns have been, the number of people that have come up and talked to me and thanked me about my perspective on guns, and that maybe I can, gives
Get
me
some consensus, yeah.
So I found in the auto industry and supply resiliency has always been, but you find people wanting to engage and partner, and those partnerships actually help you keep the ball moving.
Well, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, we're going to continue to follow what you're doing. And thanks for the time here today, and a really substantive conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Christy. Okay. It's good to be with you.